your commanding officer would then basically tell you you're going to go because you've got no moral fibre. And he'd say it in a nice way. The guy's low on down there would call you a fucking gay bastard.
Late one night I had a couple of guys banging on the door going, if you want to be a woman and you want to find out what it feels like, open this door and we'll show you.
And when I walked into the crew room, they all turned their backs. And as I walked around the crew room, they turned their backs, so their backs were always facing me. So I got the message they didn't want to talk to me.
To the point of gun in mouth. Couldn't pull the trigger. I couldn't do it to the other people who I lived and worked with.
All these women served in the armed forces. All are transgender. For most of the public, this is what they see of Britain's military. But behind the pomp and the pageantry are the lives of its serving personnel.
Good evening. MPs say the Ministry of Defence should lose its immunity from prosecution in cases where there have been serious failings in training.
3 recent deaths in army training have forced the Ministry of Defence to reconsider how it looks after the welfare of its employees. Numerous policy updates have tried to change the treatment of trans individuals serving in the military. Now, an update in policy released in April 2016, not yet revealed to the public, hopes to further improve their lives. But for many of them, it's not the policy that needs to change, but the culture of those working in the armed forces themselves. Dawn Pomfret's father forced her to join up to hide her feelings of femininity. She felt unable to reveal her true gender identity and transitioned after she left in 1972.
I was going to become the best man I could be, and the only way you could do that was the army. Or the army will train you out. It would always be tacit discrimination. You would always get the, oh no, we're all right with things like this, but you know damn well they're not. It was, what would happen is the group that you're in, e.g. your section or your platoon, would turn their back on you. As soon as I thought that it's like a pack of wolves. I hate to do the analogy with this for a group of soldiers, but they would turn on you, and then you would find yourself ostracised within that group. Is it changing? Yes, but I think it's a microcosm of what we see within society at the moment. I don't think it's fully there.
Before 1999, it was not permitted to serve in the armed forces as a transgender individual. Emma Vickers has been working on LGBT history in the armed forces throughout her academic career.
Trans identity was conflated with possessing same-sex desire, which is completely incorrect, as we know, and was thrown out for indecency, which is a catch-all term for possessing a same-sex identity. So before 1999, it's quite a mixed bag of experience. There's always been, I think, a disjuncture between policy and then how it's implemented. And so culturally, things need to change a bit more, if not a lot more. There's a definite disjuncture. You will get a mixed bag of people some of whom have very accepting units, others who I'm sure haven't had the best of times. So it's lacking a consistency. You could argue that lack of consistency is going to be, the experience of people in any institution, organisation, but I think it's particularly pronounced for the MOD, and just because it's a very conservative institution.
Since then, legislation has been developed to try and prevent discrimination taking place at work. In 1999, sex discrimination regulations were introduced. Ahmed Analhas is a lawyer who specialises in discrimination claims against service personnel.
What those regulations did was to extend certain protection under the Sexual Discrimination Act 1975 to transgender individuals in the workplace. The MOD reacted to this, as did a number of public bodies, by creating their own policy, because this legislation applies to all public bodies. And the policy itself that the MOD provides is very detailed. It's comprehensive. Many people believe it to be a very good example of the type of policy you need for transgender individuals in the workplace.
1999 saw an extension of the Sex Discrimination Act 1975, allowing trans individuals to serve openly in the armed forces for the first time. In 2009, the MOD released a new policy indicating more clearly how forces should support transgender individuals and protect them from discrimination. This policy was updated in April 2016. As it is a defence instruction and notice, it is not yet available to anyone outside the armed forces. Although it is still too early to tell how successful the new policy will be, there are new up-to-date guidelines in place. But policy has not led to a consistency of treatment from one person to another. Joanne Wingate was the first trans-serving personnel in the Army, beginning her transition in the 1990s. Although some aspects of military life made her feel safer, she never felt fully accepted.
The Army and what we went through, I expected, so it was wrong, but it wasn't unexpected. The military is a very structured environment, and it's structured through discipline and the rank structure that it has. In civilian employment, although there is a structure, it's not always disciplined, and people will say what they think irrespective of the consequence, or maybe not even realising that there's going to be a consequence. Or in the military, if a soldier steps out of line, for whatever reason, there's a structure there to put it right, to put them back in line. Yeah, so I felt I was safer in the military than out of it. I think I was tolerated rather than accepted, which is a huge difference. Yeah? And I think that was the same throughout my career. Tolerated, which is okay. It's okay.
Caroline Page served with the RAF in Iraq, Afghanistan and Bosnia as a fast jet and battlefield helicopter pilot. She served for 35 years, 16 of these as a trans woman.
People would accept me as a female officer. I'd go and say, "Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Page," and it wouldn't be questioned. But as soon as somebody went, "That's the one, that's her," then attitudes changed. And it was quite uncomfortable, but I had my security blanket, which was the people that I worked with who were fantastic. I made some really good friends, and they were really lovely people. It was only when I went to different places and they hadn't got to know me or speak to me and things properly.
This is my first one, which was the Commander Joint Helicopter Command. So
Caroline helped to advise on trans policy, even after retiring in 2014. She feels after a 7-year gap in policy updates, there is still an inconsistency in the way trans personnel are treated on an individual basis.
It's still open to individual interpretation of the rules. So, for instance, somebody can go in and say, I've transitioned and I now need a uniform that is appropriate to my gender, and that can be, okay, right, we'll do this very discreetly. Come in on Tuesday and we'll issue everything together, so you don't need to worry about that. And others will go, well, whatever, you need to apply for this, you need to apply for that, you need to come in here, I need to tell so-and-so, I need to tell so-and-so. It all depends on how somebody reads the rules. It's never just down to policy, it's also down to awareness through training and things. And what needs to happen really is that training needs to be brought down to the lowest possible point. So from the earliest, they know that being different isn't a reason why somebody should be barred from being in the military.
So, is this something the Ministry of Defence can control?
I think overwhelmingly it is a cultural problem, and the policy itself is well defined, well written. Just by way of example, there is an acknowledged cultural issue within the Ministry of Defence in respect of sex discrimination, and I think that the problems that transgender individuals face are probably mimicked by that kind of culture. You can have the best written law, the best written regulations, but if they're not followed, they're not really worth the paper that they're printed on. I think that what we need to see is more leadership, more of that openness. By way of example, the Ministry of Defence have access to statistics which deal with these specific issues. And I think that they can be more open about these things. And they can also, instead of simply projecting these details, they can act on them in a bit more of a proactive way.
The MOD refused to allow anyone to be interviewed on this subject. They also refused our freedom of information request. However, they did provide us with a statement which reads, "We seek to recruit and retain personnel to play their part in safeguarding the UK, regardless of gender identity." We also approached former Chief of Staff and members of the Defence Select Committee, all of whom refused our interview because they felt they didn't know enough about the subject. Perhaps this is telling about how little is known about the issue by key figures who should perhaps know more. The Women and Equalities Committee have recently released a report into transgender equality. Ruth Cadbury MP is a member of that committee. I showed her some footage from my meetings with transgender veterans.
I thought that was really interesting because I kind of assumed that the military would be a place which would be really hostile to transgender people. So that was interesting. I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be easy and there are a lot of hurdles to overcome.
It's taken 7 years for them to change their policy on trans individuals from 2009 to April of this year. Do you think that's too long for transgender personnel to wait for a change?
Well, 7 years is an awful long time to wait. If you're a transgender person and you want your workplace, particularly if it's a 24/7 workplace like the military, I think it is too long. But the fact is they've done it, and they will now be addressing their policies and their procedures, their workplace environment and so on. So, there's a potential for the military to be a good example, an exemplar for it. And it's because what's happened is the military took far too long to address equal rights for gays, and they've almost done the two together. So I think there's a real, they're going to go through a long journey in a short time, and as I say, probably a lot of other places of employment could learn from that.
Has the improvement of trans individuals... Gemma Watkins retired from the Navy last year, but still works on transgender policy. She had a smooth transition, but admits it's not all plain sailing with inconsistencies across the services. She gives an insight into the new 2016 policy.
It's an updated language, which is great, because the other one was a little out of date, shall we say, and was actually getting further and further out of date. The policy itself is more broad brushstrokes rather than a definite plan, because everybody's transition path is different. No two are alike, although, yes, the broad brushstrokes are, this is the way, the Royal Navy would like it to happen, and they'll support you in this, and this. So, as much as, yes, I say everything is smooth, there is a certain amount of sort of like, it might be paranoid, but, there are people who will sort of go, There is a lack of understanding, which is, ignorance is, and I don't mean horrible ignorance, but just a lack of understanding, not being aware. People, if they don't understand, that's when they say the wrong thing, think the wrong thing. I don't want to say do the wrong thing, but yeah, that can happen.
The recent policy change is another step in the right direction. But there is still a cultural issue and an inconsistency in how trans individuals are treated from person to person and base to base. These veterans help to pave the way for trans women in the armed forces. But it's yet to be seen whether the 2016 update will help to carry on their work and improve the lives of all transgender personnel in the armed forces.
I hope that into 25, 30, 40 years, if somebody chooses transition, nobody will bat an eyelid. It'll just be they are being who they are meant to be.